Good evening, listeners. My name is EveningWhisperTales. Tonight, I'll be telling you some scary horror stories to help you relax and fall asleep. If you enjoy this channel, I'd really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Now, let's begin our evening together. Story 1. My daughter started talking to the empty room. It began with the baby monitor, not crying, not static, talking. I was halfway down the hall when I heard it. My daughter's small voice drifting out of the speaker on the kitchen counter while I rinsed a mug. "No, not like that," she said. I froze. She was supposed to be asleep. The house was quiet otherwise. No TV, no footsteps from upstairs. Just the low hum of the refrigerator in her voice, soft and careful, like she didn't want to wake anyone. I stepped closer to the monitor. "Daddy's asleep," she whispered. My stomach tightened. I hadn't gone to bed yet. Then she giggled, a tiny, breathy laugh. "Okay, tomorrow." I jogged upstairs. Her bedroom door was open a crack, spilling nightlight glow into the hall. Inside, she was tucked under her blankets exactly the way I'd left her. Stuffed rabbit pinned under one arm, eyes closed. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. I leaned over and whispered her name. She didn't stir. I checked the closet, empty, under the bed, clear, window locked. I went back downstairs and stared at the monitor, silent. Maybe she'd been sleep-talking. Kids do that. I turned it down and went back to the sink. 30 seconds later, "You're not supposed to be here." I spun around, her voice again, clearer, closer to the mic. I whispered into the receiver, "Honey?" She answered instantly, "Yes?" My skin prickled. I hadn't pressed the talk button. "I'm downstairs," I said slowly. "I know." "Who are you talking to?" She hesitated long enough that I pictured her sitting up in bed. "I don't know," she said, then quieter. "He says I shouldn't tell you." I bolted back upstairs. Her door was wide open now. She was sitting upright in bed, blanket pooled in her lap, staring toward the corner of the room where her toy chest sat beneath the window. Nothing was there. "What did you mean?" I asked. She pointed. "Right there." My throat went dry. "There's nothing there." She frowned at the empty space. "Yes, there is." I crossed the room and switched on the overhead light. Bright, harsh, still nothing. She blinked, looked confused. "He moved." I crouched beside her bed. "Who moved?" "The man who stands where the door used to be." Cold spread down my spine. "What door?" She looked at me like I was the one being weird. "The other one." I checked the walls, closet, bedroom door, window, 4 solid surfaces. "No other doors," I said. She tilted her head. "There was last night." I stayed with her until she fell asleep. Didn't go back downstairs, didn't turn the monitor down. An hour later, while she breathed slow and steady beside me, the speaker on her nightstand crackled softly, not loud enough to wake her, just loud enough for me. A man's voice whispered through it. "She can see it because she's closer." I unplugged the monitor. The room stayed silent. I didn't sleep. At 3:14 a.m., my phone vibrated, a notification from the baby monitor app. Motion detected, camera angle, nursery. I opened it. The feed showed my daughter asleep. The corner by the toy chest was darker than the rest of the room. Something tall stood there, not moving, not breathing, just barely outlined by the nightlight. And then, from right beside my ear, a whisper. "She wasn't supposed to wake you." Story 2. My wife, the cook, keeps setting the table for someone else. It started small, 1 extra plate. I didn't even notice it the first time. I came home late from work, kicked off my boots and wandered into the kitchen while my wife was finishing dinner. Pasta, salad, garlic bread, steam fogging the windows. 3 plates sat on the table. We only needed 2. I pointed at it, expecting company. She blinked, looked at the place setting. Fork, knife, napkin folded neat, glass filled with water. "Oh," she said slowly. "I must have done that without thinking." She picked it up and carried it back to the counter. Didn't seem bothered. That night while she slept, I heard cabinets opening downstairs. Soft, careful, like someone trying not to wake the house. I checked the clock, 2:41 a.m. I lay there listening, no footsteps, just drawers sliding, silverware clinking once, then nothing. In the morning she was already up, coffee brewing, sunlight coming through the windows. 3 mugs sat on the counter, 1 still steaming. "You make one for yourself too," I said. She froze, stared at the mugs. "I only made 2. She poured the 3rd down the sink without saying anything. The water kept running longer than it needed to. The next night I heard the chairs scraping slowly across tile. I got up, bare feet cold on the floor. Kitchen light was on. Table fully set. 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 folded napkins. My wife stood at the stove with her back to me, stirring an empty pot over and over. "Honey," I said. She flinched. "Oh, I didn't hear you." "There's nothing in that." She looked inside, frowned. "I could have sworn." I stepped closer. The 3rd chair was pulled out slightly, like someone had just stood up. She followed my gaze. Her smile twitched. "I'll fix it." She reached for the extra place setting, stopped. Her hand hovered in midair. Then she whispered, "It moved." What moved? The fork? I hadn't seen it, but it was closer to the plate than before. Barely. That night I locked the bedroom door. She didn't comment. Sometime after midnight I felt her slide out of bed. Didn't hear her feet touch the floor. Just the mattress shift. Minutes passed. I followed. The kitchen was dark. The back door stood open. Cold air poured in. Moonlight fell across the table. 3 chairs, all pushed in. 3 plates, all empty. I shut the door and turned on the light. My wife stood in the corner by the pantry, not moving, facing the wall. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. "Honey?" She turned slowly, eyes glassy. "He doesn't like when you change things." "Who?" "The one who sits with us." My stomach tightened. "There is no one else." She shook her head. "There is after midnight." I grabbed her arm. She felt cold, too cold. We went back to bed. I didn't sleep. In the morning, there were 4 plates. I stood there staring. My wife came in behind me. Didn't say anything, just added a 4th glass of water, filled it, and whispered, "He brought someone." Story 3. My son keeps asking about the basement. We don't have. My son has never liked the dark. Ever since he was little, he wanted the hallway light on. The closet door cracked, the night light glowing blue in the corner of his room. So when he started insisting that the basement light was bothering him, I knew something was wrong. We don't have a basement. Our house sits on a concrete slab. No cellar, no crawl space, no hidden door. Just kitchen, living room, bedrooms, that's it. The first time he said it, I was brushing my teeth. "Daddy?" he called from down the hall, voice sleepy. "Yeah, bud." "The basement light is shining under my door." I leaned out into the hallway. The floor was dark. Only the bathroom light was on. "There's no light under your door," I said. "Yes, there is." I walked into his room. He was sitting up in bed, pointing at the crack beneath it. Nothing there. darker carpet, shadow. See? I said. He blinked, frowned. It went away. That should have been the end of it. 2 nights later, he refused to go to sleep. Said he could hear footsteps on the stairs. We don't have stairs either. I sat on his bed until he calmed down. At 2:16 a.m., I woke up to a soft thumping sound, rhythmic, like someone testing a door with the heel of their hand. It was coming from below me, from somewhere under the floor. I lay there listening. It stopped when I moved. In the morning, my son asked if the man had gone back downstairs. "What man?" He shrugged. "The one who stands by the furnace." I stared at him. "We don't have a furnace room." "Yes, we do." He drew it for me at breakfast. Crayons. A staircase behind the laundry room. A long concrete hallway. A door at the end. A tall shape standing beside it. No face, just long arms. "You go down there when I'm sleeping," he said. "I do not." He colored the door black, all the way black. That night I waited, lights off, house silent, 2:14 a.m. A sound slid through the floor, a hollow creak, then another, footsteps, slow, ascending, from directly beneath the living room. I stood up and pressed my ear to the floor. 3 distinct steps. Pause. Then, a long dragging noise, like something heavy pulling itself across concrete. My son whispered from his doorway, "He's coming up." I spun. He stood barefoot in the hall, eyes wide. "Get back in bed." "He comes every night." I grabbed him and locked us in his room, held him while the noise moved across the house, directly under the walls, under the closet, under the bed, then silence. In the morning, I pulled up a corner of the laundry room mat, scratched at the vinyl, concrete, solid, no seams, no hatch, no door. At lunch, my son asked if the other staircase would open soon. "What other staircase?" "The one under the fridge." I sold the house 3 days later. The buyer asked why. I didn't answer. But when we moved out, I noticed something new. A thin rectangle cut into the concrete floor, right where the fridge had been sitting. Fresh, clean, like a door that hadn't been there long enough to get dirty. Story 4. My brother keeps leaving voicemails. He never sent. My brother hates voicemail, always has. If he misses a call, he texts. If he's busy, he sends a thumbs up emoji. The idea that he'd sit there talking into his phone when he could just type annoyed him irrationally. That's why the first message unsettled me. I listened to it while waiting in line at the grocery store. His voice, quiet, breathing a little too hard. "Hey, call me when you get this." That was it. No joke, no explanation. I called back immediately, straight to voicemail. I texted, "You good?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished, nothing else. An hour later, another voicemail came in. Longer this time. Static at first, then his voice again, closer, to the mic. "I don't think I'm alone." My chest tightened. I tried calling again. No answer. I drove to his apartment. He lived 10 minutes away in a complex I'd been to 100 times, 3rd floor, end unit, balcony full of dead plants he kept meaning to water. His car was in its spot, lights off inside. I knocked, nothing. I knocked again, harder. Phone buzzed, another voicemail. I didn't even open the app. I hit play. I can hear myself talking in the bathroom. My stomach dropped. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I buzzed his neighbor. An older woman cracked her door. "Has my brother been home today?" She nodded slowly. "He came in about an hour ago." "Did you see anyone else with him?" She hesitated. "I heard 2 sets of footsteps." I went back to his door and pressed my ear against it. Silence, then water running from the bathroom. I knocked again, opened the door. Nothing. My phone vibrated, voicemail. It keeps leaving messages from my phone. I stepped back, called the police. While I waited, I listened to the messages again. They weren't exactly the same. The pauses were in different places. The breathing changed, like whoever was talking was learning how he sounded. The officers showed up and knocked. No response. They forced the door. Inside was empty. No sign of a struggle. TV off. Shoes by the door. Phone on the coffee table. Face down. No missed calls. No voicemails. Bathroom sink still running. Mirror fogged. Steam filling the small room. On the mirror, written with a finger, "Stop calling me." The cops told me he probably stepped out, said the messages could have been delayed, network glitch. I didn't argue. That night I got another voicemail, not his voice this time, mine, whispering, "Don't come back." Story 5. My wife says I come home. Every night I work late. She knows that, always has. Security job, rotating shifts. Sometimes I don't get back until 2 or 3 in the morning. We text goodnight, she locks the door. That's the routine. So when she asked me why I kept waking her up, I thought she was joking. "You came in around 1, she said over breakfast, pouring coffee. "You didn't have to kiss me awake." I blinked. "I didn't get home until 4. She frowned. "No, you came in earlier. You smelled like rain." It hadn't rained. I laughed it off. That night I made a point of texting when I left work. "On my way." She replied with a heart. When I got home at 3:17 a.m., the house was dark and locked. I unlocked the door quietly, checked the kitchen, peeked into the bedroom. She was asleep. Didn't stir. Good. In the morning she stared at me while I tied my shoes. "You forgot your jacket." "I wore it." She shook her head. "The other one, the gray hoodie." "I don't own a gray hoodie." "You were wearing it when you came in." "I didn't come in until 3. She set her mug down slowly. "You came in at 1:12. She was very specific. "You stood in the doorway for a minute like you were listening. Then you went to the bathroom and ran the sink." Cold crept into my stomach. I checked the sink. Dry. Third night, I stayed late on purpose. Sat in my car down the street at midnight. Lights off. House in view. At 12:58 a.m., the porch light flicked on. Front door opened. Someone stepped inside. Tall, my height, broad shoulders, wearing a hood. I couldn't see the face. The door shut. I didn't move for 2 minutes. Then I ran. The door was locked. I unlocked it with shaking hands. Inside, the house was quiet. My wife slept. I checked the bathroom. Sink dry. Mirror clean. No footprints. No wet rug. In the morning, she asked why I'd left so quickly. "What do you mean?" "You didn't even come to bed." I told her everything, but she went pale. That night, we put a chair under the doorknob, locked the bedroom. At 1:11 a.m., the bathroom faucet turned on. We didn't move. At 1:13, something tried the bedroom door. Soft. Testing. Then my phone buzzed. Text from her. She was lying next to me. "Why are you outside story 6? My neighbor keeps bringing back the same dog." I noticed the dog before I noticed anything else. Medium-sized, brown and white. One ear bent forward, the other stuck half upright like it had healed wrong after an injury. Friendly looking, wagged its tail at everyone. My neighbor walked it every morning at exactly 6:40 a.m. Same hoodie, same baseball cap, same slow shuffle down the sidewalk while scrolling his phone. The first week, nothing felt off. Second week, I realized something. The dog was always clean. No matter the weather, no mud, no wet fur after rain, no leaves tangled in its coat. Just perfect. One morning, I was grabbing the mail when they passed. "Cute dog," I said. He smiled politely. "Thanks. What's his name?" He paused. "Buddy." The dog wagged harder. The next day, I asked again. What was his name? He blinked like he hadn't heard me. "Buddy." Same tone, same pause. I started paying attention. Every walk followed the exact same route. Down our block, past the park entrance, across the small footbridge. Loop back 20 minutes later. 20 minutes. Not 19, not 21. Always 20. Then one Tuesday morning, the dog was limping. Back left leg, dragging slightly. My stomach tightened. When they came back around, I noticed dark stains on the sidewalk behind them. Blood. Not a lot, but enough. "Your dog's hurt," I called. My neighbor looked down. "Oh." Didn't sound concerned, didn't kneel, didn't check the leg, just kept walking. The next morning, dog was fine. Perfect again. No limp, no scab, no bandage. I convinced myself I imagined it. Until Thursday. Thursday, the dog wasn't there. My neighbor walked alone, leash in hand, clipped to nothing, arms swinging gently like something invisible was tugging it. I stood on my porch. "Where's your dog?" He stopped, looked at the leash, looked back at me. "What dog?" My throat tightened. "The one you walk every morning." He frowned. "I don't have a dog." Then he kept walking. Friday morning, they were back, dog and all. Same bent ear, same coloring, same cheerful trot. I followed them, kept far enough back that I didn't look obvious. Past the park, past the footbridge, into the wooded path behind the playground. They disappeared around a bend. When I reached it, the trail was empty. No dog, no man, just trees, dirt, and something lying in the middle of the path. A leash, snapped in half, dark stains soaking into the rope. I didn't touch it. Saturday morning, 6:40. They passed my house again. New leash, same dog, clean, perfect, wagging. That night I couldn't sleep. At 6:38 a.m., I sat by my window, watching, waiting. At 6:40, the porch light across the street turned on. My neighbor stepped outside, alone, leash dangling, no dog. He stood there, waiting. The leash twitched, slowly, like something was taking hold. Then he smiled down at nothing and said, "Good boy." 2 seconds later, the dog stepped into view, out of thin air, tail wagging, same bent ear, same eyes. Only this time, they were cloudy, like something had died behind them and kept walking anyway. Story 7. My daughter keeps waving at the corner of the yard. She started doing it in the afternoons. Right after school, backpack tossed on the porch, shoes kicked off in the grass. She'd run straight to the fence and stand there, waving into the empty corner where our yard met the woods. At first I thought she was just pretending. Kids do that. Imaginary friends, bugs, neighbors you can't see from the house. But she waved the same way every time. Slow, careful, like she didn't want to scare whoever was standing there. I watched from the kitchen window one day while making dinner. She stood perfectly still. Hand raised, fingers bending back and forth. Nobody on the other side of the fence. No trail, no movement in the trees. I stepped onto the porch. "Who you waving at?" She didn't turn around. "The man who stands behind the bush." "What man?" She pointed at the thick shrub near the back corner, leaves dark and tangled. "He's new." My stomach tightened. "Nobody's there." She frowned. "Yes, there is." I walked down into the yard, checked behind the bush. Nothing. just damp leaves and old branches. When I looked back, she was still waving. He says, "You're not supposed to look." That night, she asked if she could sleep in our bed. Didn't say why. Just stood in the doorway clutching her blanket until I nodded. At 11:43 p.m., she sat up suddenly. "He's closer." "Who?" "The man." I checked the windows. Curtains closed, blinds tight. The backyard was dark. The morning came, like nothing happened. After school, she went straight back to the fence. Same spot, same wave. I walked out with her, nothing. I stayed outside, pretended to scroll my phone. Watched the leaves, didn't move. As she whispered, "He doesn't like when you stay." "I don't see anyone." "That's why." She stopped, waving, backed toward me. "He says he can come in now." I grabbed her hand, pulled her inside, locked the door. That night I installed floodlights, motion sensors aimed at that corner. At 2:07 a.m. they clicked on. Bright white light flooding the yard. I rushed to the window. The bush was shaking, leaves trembling. Something tall stood behind it, just barely visible through branches, not stepping out, not hiding either, just standing where the light was brightest, facing the house. My daughter whispered behind me. He says, "Thank you for turning the light on." Story 8. My wife keeps receiving flowers from a house that burned down. The first bouquet arrived on a Tuesday. No card. Just a bundle of white lilies tied with twine, sitting on our porch when my wife got home from work. She smiled when she brought them in. "Secret admirer?" I laughed. "From who?" She shrugged. "Guessing wrong number." The second bouquet came 3 days later. Roses this time. Deep red, no card, no delivery van. Just there, by the door. I checked the security camera. Nothing, no person, no car. Just the flowers appearing between frames, like they'd been placed while the camera blinked. My wife thought it was funny. I didn't. The third bouquet came with a note. Not a name, just an address, handwritten 2 miles away. I recognized it instantly. The empty lot at the end of Willow Street. The place that burned down last year. 3 people died in that fire. I drove there alone. Charred foundation, blackened trees. Nothing left but caution tape fluttering in the wind. No mailbox. No porch. No place to leave flowers. That night, another bouquet appeared. Sunflowers, fresh, dirt still on the stems. My wife opened the door and froze. "I didn't tell you about the address." "I know." She stared at the flowers. "I didn't either." The note attached this time said, "Thank you for visiting." I unplugged the doorbell camera. It still recorded. The next morning, my wife said she dreamed of a door knocking, over and over, from inside a burning house. That afternoon, the bouquet was waiting when she got home. Black roses, wilted, smelled faintly of smoke. The note read, "Come inside." I threw them away in the dumpster behind the grocery store. An hour later, they were back, on our porch. Same ribbon, same ash-smudged petals. My wife stopped sleeping, stopped smiling, started checking the windows at night. She asked me if I'd left the door unlocked. I hadn't. At 2:33 a.m., the doorbell rang. Once. I looked at the camera. The porch was empty. The flowers sat on the mat. Fresh, damp, warm. My wife whispered behind me, "It's coming from the lot." The doorbell rang again, this time inside the house, from the hallway. Story 9. My son's drawings started showing things before they happened. My kid loves drawing. Markers everywhere. Crayons snapped in half. Construction paper stuffed into every drawer. He draws dinosaurs, trucks, superheroes. messy scribbles that turn into stories when he explains them. So when he brought me a picture of our living room, I smiled until I noticed the figure behind the couch. Tall, thin, arms too long, head brushing the ceiling. I pointed. "Who's that?" He didn't look up from coloring. "That's the man who watches TV with us." My stomach tightened. "We don't have anyone else here." He shrugged. "Sometimes." I taped the drawing to the fridge and forgot about it. 2 days later, the TV turned on by itself while we were in the kitchen. Static, volume low. When I shut it off, my son watched the dark screen. "He doesn't like when you do that." "Who?" "The man." I checked behind the couch, closet, hallway, nothing. The next drawing showed our kitchen, me at the sink, my wife at the counter, a third figure by the back door. This one had no face, just a black oval. I asked where he'd seen that. He shrugged again. "He stands there when you're asleep." I didn't sleep that night. A week later, he drew the backyard, the swing set, the fence, and something crouched behind the shed. I took the paper outside. Nothing there. That afternoon, I mowed the lawn. Nothing. Night fell. At 11:19 p.m., the floodlight clicked on. I looked out the window. Something stood behind the shed, tall, very thin, facing the house, exactly where he'd drawn it. I grabbed the flashlight. It was gone by the time I reached the door. The grass was flattened, pressed down like something had been standing there for a long time. I burned the drawings in the grill, every single one. The next morning, he handed me another blank page, except for one thing, a single stick figure standing in the hallway, labeled in careful block letters. You, Story 10. My wife keeps hearing footsteps that stop when I listen. The first time she mentioned it, I didn't take her seriously. We were brushing our teeth, standing shoulder to shoulder in the bathroom mirror glow, when she paused mid-rinse and stared at the hallway behind us. "Do you hear that?" I leaned out. House was quiet, dishwasher humming downstairs, a sea clicking on and off, normal night sounds. "Hear what?" "Footsteps. Probably the pipes." She didn't answer right away, just kept listening. They stopped. That became the pattern. She'd freeze, tilt her head, ask if I heard something. I never did, until the night I did. We were in bed around midnight, lights off, phones glowing faintly in our hands when she grabbed my wrist. "There." I held my breath. At first, nothing. Then a soft sound, not creaking, not popping, a careful thud, like weight shifting on carpet, from the hallway. Then another, slow, measured, too far apart to be pets, too heavy. They reached our bedroom door, stopped. My wife whispered, "That's where they always stop." Silence followed, thick and deliberate. I opened the door. Hallway empty, kids' doors shut, bathroom dark, stairs leading down into shadow. I checked the locks, every window, back door, basement, nothing. We went back to bed. At 2:41 a.m., she shook me awake. "They're back." This time I heard them instantly. Soft, patient steps crossing the living room below us. Not rushing, not stumbling, walking. I crept to the top of the stairs, listened. Footsteps moved across the rug, kitchen tile. Then the sink faucet clicked on, off, on again. Someone testing it. I whispered her name. She stood behind me, pale. They never turned the water on. The footsteps crossed the kitchen, returned to carpet, stopped at the base of the stairs, right under us, waiting. I grabbed the baseball bat from the hall closet, held it tight. Nothing came up. Eventually, the house went quiet. In the morning, there were damp footprints on the kitchen floor, bare feet leading from the sink to the living room, then vanishing in front of the couch. That night I stayed up, lights off, bat in hand. At 12:59, the living room camera pinged my phone. Motion detected. The feed showed nothing at first. Then the carpet near the couch slowly compressed, like someone invisible was lowering themselves into a seated position. The cushion dipped, an outline formed, head, shoulders, arms resting on knees, watching the stairs, waiting for me to come down. And behind the couch, another indentation appeared, someone else, sitting, facing the same direction. Story 11. My daughter says the man in the hallway is getting closer. It started with distance, not sightings, not screams, just measurements. We were brushing teeth before bed when my daughter leaned out of the bathroom and squinted down the hallway toward her bedroom. "He's closer," she said. I didn't look at first. I kept rinsing my toothbrush. "Who?" "The man." I sighed quietly. She'd had nightmares before. Kids do. "How close?" She thought about it. Past the picture frame. The hallway was empty, just family photos and a coat rack near the front door. "Nothing there," I said. She shook her head. "He stands where the carpet changes." The carpet didn't change anywhere. That was what bothered me. We had hardwood from the living room to the bedrooms. No seam, no transition. I walked down the hall anyway. Lights on, doors closed, nothing. She slept in our room that night. At 1:32 a.m., she whispered from beside me. "He moved again." My stomach tightened. "Where is he now?" "At the stairs." We lived in a single-story house. There were no stairs. I sat up slowly, listened, nothing. "Go back to sleep. He's waiting." Morning came too fast. At breakfast, she drew the hallway. Crayon, careful lines, our front door, our bedroom, her room. Between them, a tall figure sketched lightly in gray. Long legs, longer arms, no face. I asked when she'd drawn it. "While you were sleeping." I tore it up, threw it away. She watched me do it, didn't cry, didn't argue, just frowned. That makes him mad. I checked the hallway rug. There was one now. Thin runner rug between rooms. Gray. We never owned it. My wife swore she hadn't bought it. That night the hallway felt narrower. Sound carried differently, like the walls were closer. At 12:58, the motion sensor light in the hall turned on by itself. Empty. Corridor. But the rug fibers were flattened, as if someone had just stood there. My daughter whispered, "He's at the door." Our bedroom door handle twitched, slow, testing, then stopped. When I yanked it open, the hall was empty, but the rug had shifted, dragged an inch closer to our room. Story 12. My wife keeps packing a bag. She swears isn't hers. I found the bag under the kitchen table. Black duffel, zipper half open, shoes inside, folded jeans, a sweater I didn't recognize. I thought maybe she'd started packing for a trip she hadn't told me about yet. "What's this?" I asked, nudging it with my foot. She frowned. "That's not mine." "You sure?" "Yes." I pulled out the sweater. Gray, soft, too big for her. Men's. She shook her head. "I didn't buy that." We left it there. That night I tripped over it in the hallway. Same bag, different spot, closer to the stairs. "I moved it," she said when I asked. "Why?" "I don't remember." At 3:04 a.m. I heard the zipper. Slow, careful. I sat up. Dark room, moonlight through the blinds. My wife lay asleep beside me. The sound came from downstairs. I crept down. The bag sat by the front door now, fully zipped, a damp patch spreading beneath it. I didn't open it. In the morning, it was back under the table, heavier. I tested it with my foot. Something in that had shifted, not soft, solid. She insisted she hadn't touched it. The third night, I waited, lights off, stairs creaking under my weight. The bag wasn't there. Front door closed, locks engaged. At 2:47 a.m., the doorknob clicked, once, then again, from inside the house. The bag slid into view across the floor, pulled from the shadowed hallway. No hands, just moving, toward the door. The zipper opened by itself. Something inside unfolded, long, pale, human-shaped. I grabbed the bat from the closet. The bag snapped shut, dragged, backward, gone. In the morning, my wife asked why the closet smelled like wet dirt. Inside the duffel sat folded clothes, mine, and a folded piece of paper that read, "You are next, story 13. My brother brought someone home and won't admit it. My brother moved into our spare room after his divorce, which was supposed to be temporary, a few months at most while he figured out finances and apartment listings. The house already felt crowded with my wife and our 2 kids, but he kept to himself, worked long shifts, and usually came home late enough that we barely crossed paths. That's why the extra shoes by the door stood out immediately. Not boots, not sneakers, not something I could mistake for my brother's, but narrow black flats dusted with dried mud along the soles. I asked my wife if she'd had a friend over while I was at work, and she shook her head, just as confused as I was, and asked if my sister-in-law had come by to drop something off. My brother denied it when I texted him, "Not mine, been at work all day, the shoes stayed." I moved them into the hall closet and forgot about them, until that night when I went downstairs for water and nearly tripped over them again, now sitting neatly beside the guest room door, like someone had slipped them off before stepping inside. I knocked, no answer, lights off. When I opened the door, my brother was asleep, sprawled sideways across the bed with headphones on, door locked from the inside. The next morning, the shoes were gone. Relief lasted until lunch, when I found a second toothbrush in the upstairs bathroom cup, one I didn't recognize, with bristles still wet and toothpaste foam drying along the handle. My wife thought maybe our daughter had grabbed a spare from under the sink, but the drawer was full and untouched, and the toothbrush wasn't one we owned. By dinner, the house felt busier than it should have. Not louder exactly, but full of the faint signs people leave behind when they move. Through rooms, chair legs scraping tile, floorboards clicking in the hallway, cabinet doors closing softly somewhere I couldn't quite place. My brother stayed in his room all evening, door shut, music playing, so when I heard footsteps cross the kitchen at midnight, I assumed he'd gone for a snack. When I checked, the lights were off and the fridge door stood open, cool air pouring into the room while the shelves inside were perfectly arranged and completely untouched. The footsteps continued upstairs, slow, not dragging, not rushing, just someone walking carefully across carpet. I followed, expecting to find my brother heading for the bathroom. Instead, the hall was empty, every door closed, the guest room silent. My wife came out of our bedroom behind me and whispered that she'd heard the same thing. In the morning, she said the house smelled different, damp, earthy, like rain-soaked coats piled in a corner. When I opened the hall closet, muddy water streaked this. Carpet beneath it and the black flats were back, toes pointed outward, a woman's scarf draped over them like someone had hung it there to dry. I confronted my brother at breakfast, told him to stop sneaking people in at night, but he looked genuinely offended and reminded me he'd barely left his room except for work and sleep. That afternoon, our daughter asked why the lady kept standing at the top of the stairs. My stomach dropped. What lady? The one who waits there and watches your door. When I checked, the stairs were empty. That night I installed a motion camera facing the hallway. At 2:18 a.m., my phone buzzed. The footage showed the upstairs light flicking on, shadows stretching down the walls, and something stepping into frame from the guest room doorway. Tall, narrow, hair hanging in wet ropes over its face, barefoot feet leaving dark prints on the carpet as it paused at the top of the stairs and tilted its head toward our bedroom door like it was listening. Behind it, in the dark room, my brother slept, perfectly still. Story 14. My wife's phone keeps taking pictures at night. It started with a flash, not lightning, not headlights through the window, but a quick white burst that lit up the bedroom ceiling for half a second while we were both asleep. My wife stirred beside me and mumbled something before rolling over. I checked the clock. 2:03 a.m. The room was dark again. I assumed it was my phone lighting up from a notification until it happened a second time. Brighter, close enough that I could see the edge of our dresser reflected on the wall. I sat up. My wife's phone lay on the nightstand. Screen dark. Camera lens pointed toward the door. I picked it up. No new notifications, no missed calls, no camera app open. She stirred. "What are you doing?" "Did you take a picture just now?" She frowned and shook her head. "Why would I?" I set it back down. We went back to sleep. The next morning, she scrolled through her gallery while making coffee and froze, thumb hovering over the screen. "I don't remember taking these." She handed me the phone. 3 photos, time-stamped between 2:03 and 2:05 a.m., all taken from her nightstand. The first showed our bedroom door closed. The second showed it cracked open. The third was closer, zoomed, dark hallway visible beyond, nothing in it. I deleted them. That night, I left my phone recording video on the dresser while we slept. At 1:58 a.m., the recording picked up the soft hum of the AC in my breathing. At 2:01 a.m., my wife's phone screen lit. Camera app opened by itself. At 2:02, the flash fired. At 2:03, something moved in the hall. Tall shadow stretching across the carpet. The camera adjusted focus. The thing didn't enter. It leaned, like it was trying to fit its head through the doorway without opening it farther. At 2:04, the phone zoomed. No hand touched the screen. At 2:05, the door creaked wider. In the video, I sat straight up in bed, still asleep, eyes closed. At 2:06, the recording stopped. When I woke, my wife was already crying in the bathroom, staring at her phone while new photos loaded, close-ups of my face while I slept, my eyelids, my mouth slightly open, my hand resting on the sheets. The last one was the hallway again, but this time something stood there, just beyond the light, and my reflection was visible in the mirror behind it, standing, watching. Story 15. My son keeps setting an alarm for a time that doesn't exist. We only noticed because it kept waking the whole house. Not a phone alarm, not a clock radio, but the emergency siren setting on his tablet, the kind meant to cut through noise during storms and evacuations. It blared from his bedroom 3 nights in a row at exactly the same moment, sharp and mechanical, sending our daughter crying into the hallway and my wife stumbling out of bed in a panic. The first time, I assumed he'd done it by accident. He was 8. Kids tap things. I shut it off and carried the tablet into the kitchen, promising myself I'd deal with it in the morning. The second night it went off again, even though the tablet was on the counter downstairs. The third time I unplugged the charger and powered the thing down completely before bed. At 2:17 a.m., the siren wailed from his room anyway. I ran upstairs with my wife close behind. The tablet lay on his nightstand. On. Alarm blaring, screen flashing red. He sat upright in bed with his hands over his ears, staring at the corner near his closet where the shadows pooled thickest. "I didn't do it," he shouted over the noise. I shut it off and checked the alarm app. There was only one entry saved. Time, 2:17 a.m. Label, door. I deleted it. He didn't sleep after that. The next morning, he told me he dreamed about a man standing in his room, tapping the screen with one long finger and smiling every time the siren went off, like he was practicing. I installed a camera facing his door, locked the windows, checked the closets. At 2:16 a.m., the camera feed went live. The hallway light flicked on. Nobody stood there. At 2:17, the siren erupted again. In the video, the tablet lifted off the nightstand, not floating, being raised. A hand shaped the blanket downward where the arm should have been. Long fingers pressed the screen. The alarm stopped. The door handle turned. Slowly, the figure leaned into the room, tall enough that its head scraped the top of the frame, shoulders bending in a way human joints didn't. It didn't step inside. It just stood there, while my son stared at it, frozen. Behind the figure, deeper in the hall, something else shifted, bigger, waiting. Story 16. My wife keeps finding mud in the bathtub. It showed up the first time after a long rainstorm, so I didn't think much of it when she yelled from the bathroom asking if I'd taken a shower in muddy boots. Brown streaks coated the porcelain, thin lines curling toward the drain, clumps of wet leaves stuck in the corners where the tub met tile. I told her I hadn't been in there since the night before and she shrugged it off, muttering about pipes backing up or something being wrong with the filter in the water heater. She scrubbed it clean. The second time happened 2 nights later when it hadn't rained at all. Same pattern, same muddy residue, same leaves. This time there were footprints, bare, human-shaped, too long. They started at the faucet and ended at the curtain where the tub wall met the floor, as if whoever had stood there had climbed out dripping and walked away. We checked the drains, basement pipes, water heater. Nothing backed up. That night we locked the bathroom door. In the morning, the mud was back, behind the locked door. More of it, heavier, smelled like wet earth and rot. We started noticing other things. The hallway, carpet near the bathroom felt damp. The back door mat was always muddy even when the yard was dry. Our dog refused to go near the tub, flattening himself against the wall whenever we tried to pull him toward the bathroom, and whining like something inside the porcelain scared him. I set up a camera facing the doorway at 2:42 a.m., motion alert. The footage showed the bathroom light flicking on, the tub curtain swelling outward, not moving, being pushed. Something inside shifted its weight. The faucet turned on. Cold water splashed against porcelain. The curtain drew back an inch. Mud poured onto the tile. A pale foot stepped down. Long toes, no nails. Then the camera glitched. When it came back, the bathroom was empty and the tub was clean, bone dry. At breakfast, my wife asked why I'd washed the tub in the middle of the night. I hadn't. I showed her the footage. It had corrupted. Every frame after the curtain moved was black. That afternoon, we noticed the drain cover in the tub had been removed and set neatly on the counter. Under it, inside the pipe, something glistened. Hair, dark, wet, wrapped around metal. Story 17. My daughter's teacher keeps calling about a student who isn't enrolled. The first voicemail came while I was in a meeting at work, so I didn't listen to it until lunch. It was a woman's voice, calm and professional, the kind you'd expect from a school administrator. Hello, this is Ms. Calder from Ridgeway Elementary. We need to discuss your child's recent behavior. Please call me back as soon as possible. I frowned. My daughter Emma was in middle school, not elementary. I texted my wife. Did Emma switch schools and forget to tell me? She replied with a question mark and a laughing emoji. When I called the number back, it rang twice before the same woman answered. Ridgeway Elementary. I think you called me by mistake, I said. My kid doesn't go there. There was a pause, but not an awkward one, a listening pause. Sir, she said carefully, your daughter has been attending our school for 3 weeks. That's not possible. She rides bus 12, seat 4, front right. My stomach tightened. Emma rode bus 12, seat 4. I asked for her full name. Ms. Calder said it, correctly, middle initial and all. I hung up. At home that night, I asked Emma how school was. She shrugged and said fine, complained about homework, asked if she could go to Maya's house on Friday. Normal, I pressed. What bus do you take? Bus 12. What seat? She rolled her eyes. Front right. Why? I didn't sleep much. The next day, my wife picked her up instead of letting her ride the bus. Emma was annoyed but didn't fight it. That afternoon, the phone rang again. Ms. Calder. Emma didn't come in today. She was sick. That's odd, she said, because someone who looks exactly like her did. Cold washed through me. What do you mean? The same clothes she wore yesterday, same backpack, but she wouldn't speak to any of the staff and didn't recognize her friends. I drove to the school. The address Ms. Calder gave me didn't match any elementary school in our district. It led to a fenced-off building on the edge of town that had once been a community college, decades ago, and now sat empty, windows boarded, parking lot cracked and choked with weeds. No buses, no kids, no banners, just rusted chain link and a sagging gate hanging open. Ms. Calder called while I stood there. I'm glad you came, she said. You said she was here today. She was. I don't see anyone. That's because classes ended early. Where is she now? She boarded the bus. What bus? Bus 12. I drove home shaking. Emma was in the living room doing homework when I arrived. My wife was cooking. Everything looked normal, except Emma's backpack sat by the door. She was using a different one. I asked her where the other one was. She stared at me. I brought this one. The phone rang again. Ms. Calder. She didn't get off. What? The other Emma. She stayed on the bus. I felt dizzy. Why? Ms. Calder lowered her voice. She said she lives with you now. Story 18. My wife's coworker keeps thanking me for rides I never gave. I met her once at a company picnic 2 summers ago, long enough to learn her name and that she worked in accounting and that she laughed too loud when she drank beer. After that, she became one of those background people in our lives, someone my wife mentioned occasionally when office gossip came up, but not someone we ever interacted with directly. So when she waved at me in the grocery store parking lot like we were old friends, I assumed she'd mistaken me for someone else. Thanks again for the ride last night, she called while loading bags into her trunk. I blinked. I think you've got the wrong person. She frowned, then smiled again, like she'd recovered from a brief embarrassment. No, it was you. You picked me up after work, around 10. I was home all night. She laughed politely. Sure. I went home unsettled. My wife was chopping vegetables when I mentioned it, and she froze with the knife halfway through a carrot. She said that? Yes. She's been telling people that for a week. My stomach tightened. She told everyone you'd been driving her home. I stared at her. I've never been to her place. That night, my wife got a text from the coworker. Tell him thank you again. I forgot my umbrella in his car. We don't own an umbrella. The next morning, the umbrella sat by our door. Black, wet, still dripping. My wife swore she hadn't brought it in. We checked the cameras. Nothing. No arrival. Just the umbrella suddenly leaning against the wall between frames. At work that afternoon, her coworker waved at me again through the office window while I waited in the car. She mouthed later, I didn't pick my wife up that night. She rode with someone else. When she got home, she was pale. She asked why you didn't come. What did you say? That you were busy. She said that's fine. He comes when you can't. Cold spread through my chest. That weekend, my wife's coworkers came over for a barbecue. The woman hugged me. You drive smoother than before, she whispered. I pulled back. Before what? She blinked. Last week. I watched her the rest of the night. At one point, she tilted her head toward the driveway and smiled. Your headlights are on. They weren't. My phone buzzed. Motion alert. Driveway camera. I opened it. Our car sat dark. Behind it, in the shadow of the garage, someone stood. Same height as me. Same build. Hands in pockets. Waiting. Story 19. My son's friend keeps showing up in family photos. We first noticed him in a Christmas picture. My sister had taken it, lining us up in front of the tree with our kids crowded at our knees while my wife held the camera on a timer. When she sent it later that night, everyone laughed at how awkward we all looked, until my brother zoomed in and asked who the extra kid was. Between my son and my niece stood a boy I didn't recognize, same age as them, dark hoodie, hands stuffed into pockets, face tilted slightly away from the camera. I assumed it was one of their friends who'd wandered into frame. When I asked my son who it was, he shrugged. That's Caleb. Caleb who? Just Caleb. I asked my sister. Not her kid. I asked my brother. Not his. Nobody knew where he'd come from. The next weekend, we went to my parents' house and took more pictures, this time in the backyard while the adults grilled and the kids ran around with water guns. Later that night, my mom texted the group chat. Why is that boy in every picture she attached 3? In all of them, Caleb stood close to my son, closer than before. In one, he had his arm around his shoulders. In another, he looked directly at the camera. Blank expression, eyes too dark. I checked my phone gallery, photos from my birthday last month. There he was, standing at the edge of the frame. I scrolled farther back. Graduation party, barbecue, camping trip. He wasn't in the earliest ones, but he appeared suddenly, then kept showing up. Closer, more centered. My son acted like nothing was wrong, said Caleb lived nearby, said he rode his bike over sometimes. When I asked for an address, he couldn't remember. When I asked his parents' names, he changed the subject. I finally told him he wasn't allowed to play with Caleb anymore. He didn't argue. He just nodded. That night, my wife woke me up. Someone was standing in our hallway. I jumped up and flicked on the light. Empty, except for muddy footprints, small ones. leading from my son's room to the front door. In the morning, I checked the camera. At 1:46 a.m., my son's bedroom door opened. Caleb stepped out. He didn't walk, he slid, feet barely lifting off the floor. At the end of the hall, he stopped and looked directly at the camera, smiled, then went back into my son's room. Story 20, my wife's reflection, started moving before she did. We noticed it together, which somehow made it worse. It wasn't late, barely past 9. The kids doing homework at the kitchen table while my wife washed dishes and I dried them. The sink full of suds and the radio playing low in the background. She turned to grab another towel and froze halfway through the motion, eyes fixed on the dark window above the sink where the glass reflected the kitchen behind us. "Did you just see that?" she asked. "See what?" "In the window." I leaned closer. Our reflection stared back, stretched slightly by the glass. Nothing unusual. She shook her head and kept working. 10 seconds later, she stopped again. It did it again. I watched this time. She hadn't moved, but her reflection had shifted its weight. Barely, like someone settling into a different stance. I laughed nervously and said it was just the glass warping or headlights passing by, but we both kept glancing up at the window until the dishes were done. Later that night, she brushed her teeth in the bathroom while I leaned in the doorway talking about weekend plans, and she suddenly stopped moving the toothbrush. In the mirror, foam dripped down her chin. Her reflection kept brushing, slow, methodical. She spit and stared. The reflection finished 3 strokes later. I stepped closer. It caught up, matched her. We stood there too long after that. Over the next few days, it happened in other reflective surfaces. The TV when it was off, the microwave door, the glass patio table. Always subtle, always just a half second ahead or behind. Our daughter noticed first. "Mom blinked twice," she said one afternoon. I blinked once. That night, my wife taped paper over the bathroom mirror. In the morning, the paper was gone. The mirror was clean. At dinner, the microwave reflected us eating. My wife lifted her fork. In the reflection, she didn't. It stayed hovering over the plate. I slammed the microwave door shut. The hum cut off. The reflection disappeared. My wife started avoiding reflective surfaces, wore makeup in the dark, showered with the curtain closed, but reflections were everywhere. Windows, spoons, phones. One night I woke up and she wasn't in bed. I found her standing in the hallway facing the coat closet mirror, not moving. The mirror version of her smiled. Her real face did not.